The Hero of Time, the most screwed over hero in the Zelda series, who went through all kinds of hardships in Hyrule and Termina. A child who for a brief time was in an adult's body, before returning to being a child and conquering the moonfall of Termina. From here, in the Lost Woods, we don't know much about the Hero of Time's further life, except for the fact that he had a bloodline descendant and became the hero's shade after death. What most likely was a final stand in a terrible battle. The Hero of Time's life was a true tragedy, but was there a moment in his life after the escape from Termina where he actually was able to be respected? It is quite possible, and as of this upload day, the 35th anniversary of the Zelda series, we'll be exploring how an ambitious third open world Hero of Time game could bring in the Breath of the Wild open world newcomers to earlier parts of the timeline, like say Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, The Wind Waker and Twilight Princess in a better way than any remake can, while also connecting loose threads and giving a satisfying but obviously tragic end to the most iconic Link, the Hero of Time. So be sure to leave a like, as we're aiming for 3,500 likes on this video, uploaded on the day of Zelda's 35th anniversary, and subscribe to the Commonwealth Realm to help the channel grow past 300,000 subscribers. Now then, we need to establish this potential future open world game made sometime after Breath of the Wild sequel by fitting in place a few crucial details about Hyrule while the Hero of Time was gone. That's right, this game will work as a replacement for a true Ocarina of Time HD remake. And the villain of this potential conclusion to the Hero of Time's life trilogy will not be Ganondorf, as he preemptively invaded the Kingdom of Hyrule after the Hero of Time ended up in Termina, starting the destructive Gerudo-Hylian War. And this war could and should be the starting point of the game. Link leaving the Lost Woods after his horror in Termina, followed by a montage of his travels and experiences on other lands outside of Hyrule. We see him trading, taking quests to sustain himself, and aging until he nears adulthood and heads back for the isolated Hyrule on the now adult Epona. At least 7 years have passed since he departed, as he and Epona once again enter the Lost Woods. In this moment we're handed control, as we in the opening stage face monsters on horseback and ride as quickly as we can to avoid getting lost in the Lost Woods and into Hyrule Field. In a similar reveal to Breath of the Wild's run out on the Great Plateau and Ocarina of Time's entrance to Hyrule Field, we see Link, the Hero of Time, shocked looking at his home, Hyrule. We see the burnt out Hyrule Field, the ruins of Castletown in the distance, and sadly this time around, also the ruins of Long Long Ranch. The setting is in many ways like taken from a Fallout game, with danger lurking right around the corner. Fearing the worst, we cross open world Hyrule Field for Kakariko Village, where we find a number of Hylian refugees, including Malon, who immediately recognizes Epona and Link.
She embraces him and cries, telling him what happened while he was gone. Here we are granted the explanation, the longest and most depressing cutscene in the Zelda series, showing everything Twilight Princess didn't tell us about the Gerudo-Hylian War. Starting with Ganondorf with his Gerudo and monster forces besieging and taking Lon Lon Ranch, killing Talon off screen as we see Malon barely escape on one of the other horses, escorted by none other than Ingo, who, despite his grudges with Talon, doesn't want Malon and the best of the horses after Epona to die. The weak forces of the Kingdom of Hyrule, unprepared for the war, clash with their invader in Hyrule Field and are utterly destroyed. The king dies, child Zelda is evacuated by Impa, and Hyrule Castle Town with the Temple of Time burned to the ground. The voiced Malon continues, thanks to heroic defences, Ganondorf's further advance was halted in front of Kakariko Village and Zora's domain. We can only thank the Gorons and Zora along with the mountainous terrain for this miracle. Even so, a stalemate at the two mountain passes was the only thing that could be accomplished. And it took years to rebuild the Hylian forces to a state where they could join forces with the Goron and Zora armies and challenge Ganondorf at Hyrule Field. The King of Evil was thanks to the sacrifice of countless young Hylians defeated, his Gerudo kingdom occupied, the Gerudo tribe expelled, he himself imprisoned and sentenced to death, and finally executed after the Spirit Temple was finally turned into Arbiter's grounds. Hyrule at first lost, but didn't need the Hero of Time to eventually pull a victory. Though many still doubt if Ganondorf was killed, as monsters he brought still roam Hyrule in large numbers, and have made life in a post-war Hyrule into a living hell. So much so that the original capital with Hyrule Castle is not being rebuilt in its original location, and instead is moved up north by the newly crowned Queen Zelda, to an area where only trusted and wealthy Hylians for now have access to, as the castle and town are still under construction.
And this is where our game that is aimed to finish the era of the Hero of Time and bridge Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess together truly begins. A very different Zelda title, where the goal isn't to save Hyrule, but rather find your place as an adult in it, and get to Zelda in the for now inaccessible North. In the last few years, you have known only 3 things: how to fight, helping people, and solving difficult riddles. Combined, these make Link a perfect mercenary or monster hunter for hire, much like Geralt was in The Witcher 3. In other words, a Zelda open world game that is focused on monster killing contracts, the character of the Hero of Time, his struggles, line of work, and telling his story as his life is slowly reaching its tragic end. Well, that with a Breath of the Wild-like open world experience, with less ruined towns and villages than the ones found in Breath of the Wild. You know, where there actually are ruins to find and fight monsters in. Oh, and where we along the way could be visiting some dungeons that we know and love from Ocarina of Time. You know, the Forest Temple, Fire Temple, Water Temple, and Shadow Temple, as these are located far away from the conflict zones of the Gerudo-Hylian War. Link sets a goal to make it back to Zelda up north, but to get there, he needs far more money and reputation. Malon is willing to help Link get connected with Hylians, Gorons, and Zoras, who are willing to pay for monster removal services in the first half of the open world. The Gerudo have been forced out from the landscape of Hyrule after the Gerudo-Hylian War, and the most sacred temple, the Spirit Temple, has become the prison for Hyrule's worst criminals, the Arbiter's Grounds. So there will be a questline there, but not handed by the Gerudo. Though first, after being informed about everything that has happened while he was gone, Link would probably visit his home in Kokiri Forest. And this is where he truly breaks down, as he finds it completely ravished by Ganondorf's forces, much like it was in the adult timeline, as this and the path to Lake Hylia had to pay the price for the king of the Gerudo's failed attempt to take Kakariko, Death Mountain, and Zora's domain. Needless to say, the entire forest village is completely overtaken by monsters. Link's fury in the Kokiri Forest ends with the Deku Tree Sprout welcoming him and Malon, and granting us the task to lead and repopulate the settlement. Together, they move back into his former home and decide to renovate the shack and also promote living in the lost paradise of the Kokiri. Our main base of the game is set, and this is also where we return after completing jobs or hunting to eat, sit down, and talk with Malon about our experiences, both from taking out the monsters and liberating more locations from them and receiving due compensation aimed at upgrading our settlement and attracting settlers, buying new armor, and finally receiving the invitation we wait for to pay a visit to Queen Zelda up north. The main quest is all about following in your father's footsteps and making it as a Knight of Hyrule with your unique armor, but to even reach the section of the map which we know from Twilight Princess, you need to take missions in your own settlement. Kakariko Village, Goron City, Zora's Domain, Lake Hylia, the ruins of Lon Ranch, and Hyrule Castletown, and some new settlements and locations in and around Hyrule Field. Think an open-world adventure that combines the best of Breath of the Wild's post-apocalyptic freedom, overworld bosses, and weapon variety, general bosses from the Zelda series, and The Witcher 3's storytelling and world-building, reconstruction and reclamation effort, monster hunting contracts, and deep, engaging, and emotionally investing character-focused side quests, with character building, customization of items, weapons, clothing, and possibly even appearance. The best way to show how the Hero of Time is making his way up and adding emphasis to the transition between Ocarina of Time and Twilight is this. Starting the game with a heavy load of the green tunic, the trauma you faced in it as a child and past adulthood, and also making it one of the worst tunics in the game. In other words, make it opposite to what we find in Breath of the Wild, where the green tunic of the wild is your ultimate reward and recognition as the hero of the wild for clearing all the Sheikah shrines. After Majora's Mask, and thanks to the hero's shade in Twilight Princess, we only know what armor the Hero of Time wore the day he fell, and that was for sure not the iconic green tunic, Master Sword, and Hylian shield. Thus we should see the Hero of Time in a number of different pieces of armor and clothing. The possibilities for a final Hero of Time game are so many, from an open world blend of the worlds of Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess Hyrule, gameplay, characters, and multi-stage side quests tied to these. Like, I could totally see how Link is tasked by Darunia to get the Megatron hammer from the Fire Temple, which you eventually end up keeping. The same goes with the hook shot in the Water Temple, while assisted by Ruto, who luckily, in the child timeline, never wowed you, but still finds you attractive. Bringing back some favorite Ocarina of Time era moments, characters and items through optional side quests that will bring us back to some of the most iconic temples of that game. And that is how we get our dungeon fix in this game, while hunting down and clearing out the monsters which, due to no blood moons in this iteration of Hyrule, are not resurrected, but instead their camps are turned into small Hylian, Goron and Zora settlements with their own unique questlines. Eventually, for our efforts down south, we'll be granted passage up north, but before that happens, we should at least have the option for Link to try to pull the Master Sword in the ruined Temple of Time, but to no avail. And this is where the game could have its turning point after some main quest missions and perhaps a few dungeons in New Central Hyrule. Zelda welcomes you at the new castle construction site, but then asks to meet you alone afterwards in her for now still humble quarters. There she tells Link the truth that Ganondorf's execution was botched due to the awakening of the Triforce of Power within him, and instead he was banished to the Twilight Realm, but from which he might one day return.
You probably know where this is going. Queen Zelda ordering Link to never tell anyone. Forget Ganondorf as he is gone in the Twilight Realm, and just accept his new duty as a newly appointed Knight of Hyrule. It is just that the Hero of Time is the Hero of Time, and will not forget about the man who ruined his life twice, despite receiving knighthood. Instead, heads straight for the Temple of Time to pull the Master Sword, but fails, and becomes obsessed with his legacy of not being remembered as a hero, and unable to be one with the threat of Ganon's return looming. With it, he returns to Malon to convince her that it is essential, while they are still young, to ensure that a bloodline descendant will pull that sword one day. As we close into the final acts, we see Link losing himself more and more, until he is called to arms by Zelda, and leaves the pregnant Malon in Ordon Village. The final act is the biggest medieval battle seen in the Zelda series, where your only task is to survive as long as you can, until you fall and get a cutscene of the Hero of Time becoming the Hero's Shade. The Hero of Time did not face Ganondorf in the child timeline, was unable to pull the Master Sword again, and fell in battle before he could become the Hero of Hyrule a second time. Though there isn't only regret, as Malon has given birth to a son and trained him to follow in his father's footsteps, and to have bloodline descendants of his own. We see this being fulfilled until we get to the birth of the Hero of Twilight, the end, and to be continued in The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess HD.
Obviously, there could be more, like a questline tied to his Triforce of Courage, passing down his green tunic, and also handing over the hero's bow to the Gorons prior to his departure. Then again, this video uploaded on the 35th anniversary of the first Zelda game was just going to bring up the great potential that lies in an open world Breath of the Wild style final Hero of Time game that will appeal to the open world Breath of the Wild Zelda fanbase sometime in the future. A game that can bring a new and bigger audience to the Hero of Time games. This way, the game, much like The Witcher 3 for the Witcher series, can both conclude the protagonist's trilogy and who deserves a grand open world adventure of his own. But what do you think? Should we lobby the Zelda team to make this game? Hope that Grezzo will one time in the future be able to make it on its own? Or maybe try to get Nintendo to buy CD Projekt Red so that they can write and build a scenario in native 4K in the future? If you enjoyed this very special video, then press that like button, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the Commonwealth Run. Finally, a big thanks goes to all our patrons on patreon.com/commonrealm, and in particular our royal producer Charles Shash. Without you, this video would not have been possible, and to all of you, please enjoy one or both of these two awesome videos.